So, I want to make a quick video giving my thoughts on Cereedra. Now, I know I recently made a video saying my final thoughts on Cereedra, and technically that's true. However, I should have specified it's my final thoughts on her kit and as well her value. This will be a video not so much, talking about her beta kit or whatever, but explaining the reason why I believe it is that they butchered Cereedra's kit so badly. Now, to many who have been following the leaks, to many who have eyeballs, you know the controversy going around Cereedra. She is probably the most underwhelming support, at least for a limited character, that we've ever had in the history of the game, to the point where even in her own niche for 1 or 2 DPSs, she is just being outvalued by so many other characters. Now, notice I didn't say outperformed, but outvalued, right? So, what do I mean by this? Well, when you're comparing a niche support for 1 or 2 DPSs, you got to look at the greats, right? We got Herda with Tribi, we got Cassie with Hyacine, and we got Acheron with Zhao Q. These are the DPS support combos you really look at when you think of, elevating that DPS's performance. E0 Tribi outperforms an E1 S1 Robin in a Herda team. Hyacine has incredible levels of value for a castress because of the very quick ult charge, her own sub DPS capability, and as well her max HP increase, right? And then you also have Zhao Q for an Acheron, who gives incredible stack generation, or at least at the time was, not second to anyone. Everybody else was kneeling down to Zhao Q if it was best in slot support for Acheron. Now, Cereedra, is she best in slot for Phanon? Yes. No matter what, she is always going to be best in slot if you have her, assuming you're comparing to other supports at the exact same level of investment. But Cereedra does not have that niche power-up that Zhao Q did on release, that Hyacine did on release, that Tribi did on release for their DPSs. Cereedra is currently calc'd at around 20 to 25% better than an E0 S0 Bronya. You can very clearly see the issue here. Tribi, Zhao Q, and Hyacine all offer a significantly bigger, overall performance increase for their DPS compared to what Cereedra is doing for Phanon. Now, the reason why I, complain about this is because if you have Tribi, if you have Robin, all you need to do is put 1 cost into Robin or Tribi, and you now have E1 Robin or E1 Tribi, which are general and best in slot for way more teams than Cereedra, and it costed you the same cost. On top of this, they'll perform on the same level, if not better, than an E0 S0 Cereedra for a Phanon. You can't do this with Tribi. At the time, you couldn't do it with Zhao Q by putting like E1 into another support. You can't do it for Hyacine either, but you can do this for a Phanon Cereedra team. It's that easy to just replace Cereedra's value, right? Now, on top of this, because Cereedra's value is as low as it is, now there's another problem. Phanon has the greatest vertical investment in the entirety of the game for a DPS. So his Lycone, higher value. His E1, not higher value, but near the same level. And then his E2 completely smokes Cereedra, right? His E2 is probably competitive, if not better, than E1 S1 Cereedra with an E0 Phanon. And on top of this, in AoE modes, such as Pure Fiction and sometimes APOC, the E2 runs away with it quite significantly, even compared to an E1 S1 Cereedra. So yeah, that is just how underwhelming this character is, right? However, after all this slander, I think I can understand where Hoyo is coming from. As of current with Cereedra, Phanon is calced as the strongest DPS in the game at all levels of investment. So, in reality, if they did make Cereedra a Hyacine for a Cassie, a Zhaoq for an Acheron, a Tribi for a Herda, what would have happened is Phanon would be like 30% stronger than Cassie, right? He'd be like 20 to 30% stronger than Cassie, and this would lead to a notable jump in HP inflation, as March would likely follow his power level. So, in a way, if we're talking about the overall game state objectively, then Cereedra being this underwhelming is actually a W, right? It leads to less HP inflation, there isn't as much power creep, Phanon will get Terravox to likely transfer his sustainless performance into sustain, and now likely what will happen is Casterus, Phanon, and as well as March will all be in like T0 for version 3, and then we get the power spike in version 4 with a safe, I guess as healthy of a jump as you can get in HSR, right? So that's my full thoughts on this entire situation. I agree Cereedra is very underwhelming, and I am sad, right? Cereedra has one of my favorite designs in the entirety of the game. If you guys remember pre-Cereedra beta, I was like the #1 guy hyping up her value, how crazy she might be, how she might be general. No way. I literally have a video saying no way they make Cereedra some niche Harmony who doesn't have good general value, right? And they did that. They did that, and to make matters even worse, they made her so bad even in her own niche, where she's not a second option for investment. She's not a third option, a fourth, a fucking fifth, right? There are so many different levels of investment that you can go down for Phanon that are more beneficial towards his overall performance than getting Cereedra. Cereedra is, in my opinion, just a whale bait. She is basically someone you only pick up after you've hit all those stop signs for Phanon investment, and finally she takes the top priority, right? But before that, she simply isn't worth it. But once again, it's a W for the game state. It leads to less power creep, and it also leads to less HP inflation. So I'm conflicted. I don't know how to feel about this, right? Objectively, it's a good thing. However, for me, subjectively, it sucks. As someone who has an E2 Phanon on his main account and an E0 Phanon on his side account. And I would like to quickly mention something I forgot to mention, I believe. Cereedra loses value when Phanon goes E2. So if you have an E2 Phanon, and let's say she's 20% better than Bronya for an E0 Phanon, this would go down to probably like 16 to 17% for an E2 Phanon, right? So it just makes her so much more prone to a version 4 support power creeping her or being competitive, while that support likely having way greater value in that future meta or other teams, right? Kind of like a Tribi situation, or you know what, a Zhaoq situation, right? I think that's the best comparison for this. Zhaoq, everybody thought he was like this niche god. There's no way anyone's gonna power creep him in an Acheron team, and then you get bam, 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 right? Cypher, Buff Silverwolf, and Heislands are all competitive against Zhaoq for an Acheron team, even if that's not even their best in slot team, Right. So keep that in mind and let me know what you guys think in the comments. What do you like more? Do you like the objective stance that Cereedra's kit being garbage has saved us from bad power creep and HP inflation, and now Phanon is actually balanced to be on the same level as Castris and March? Or do you think this sucks? Do you still think she should have gotten this noticeable buff for her niche? Even if Phanon ends up being 30% stronger than everyone else, it finally makes her a worth pulling for character instead of a filler one, right? I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you have a great night. And peace out.